They say heartbreak doesn't just break your heart, it reshapes your entirety. That was exactly what happened to Nelson. Nelson wasn't born a bad man. In fact, he used to be one of those rare young men every woman prayed for. He was focused, calm, respectful, and full of dreams. His late mother always said, "My son, if you love, love with your heart. But if love turns sour, walk away with your dignity." Unfortunately, Nelson didn't remember that part. It all started with Angela, the girl he loved more than his own life. She was everything he ever wanted. Her laughter could make him forget his troubles, and her smile was enough reason to live. He had plans for her, marriage, a small but beautiful house, and a future built from love and patience. He didn't have much, but he had hope. But one hot afternoon, that hope died. He went to Angela's place to surprise her, carrying a small box with a silver ring inside. He was ready to propose. But what he met shattered him completely. Angela was in another man's arms, a man old enough to be her father. A wealthy businessman who drove a black Prado and spoke through his nose. When she saw Nelson standing at the door, she gasped and muttered, "Nelson, please, I can explain." But he didn't wait. He just smiled painfully and said, "No need, Angela. I understand now. Love doesn't pay bills." That night, Nelson sat by his window, staring into the darkness, shaking like a man who had seen death. He didn't cry at first. Until her name slipped out of his mouth. Then the tears flowed. But amidst those tears, something dark was born. He swore silently. "No woman will ever see my tears again. If they want to play games, I'll show them I can play better." And that was the night Nelson died, and Nellie the Playboy was born. At first, it started with one girl, then 2, then 10. He became a sweet talker, smooth and calculated. His mission was simple: make them fall, use them, and walk away smiling. His friends couldn't understand him anymore. They would say, "Bro, calm down. Not all women are the same." And he would reply with a bitter laugh, "You see this life? It's eat or be eaten. I'm just doing what they did to me." Every weekend, there was a new girl. Tall, short, dark, fair, slim, fat, Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, it didn't matter. He used to joke with his friends, "I'm just collecting national samples." They laughed, but inside, Nelson was empty. He didn't know that revenge was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. At night, after the noise and laughter, Nelson would lie awake. He would remember Angela's betrayal, and for a brief moment, he would feel a sting in his chest. But he quickly brushed it off, convincing himself that emotions were for fools. His life became a cycle: love them, break them, and boast about it. The more he hurt others, the less human he became. Nelson became the kind of man mothers warn their daughters about. A man with a charming smile and a wicked mission. And he was good at it, until the day he met Joy. One bright Sunday afternoon, Nelson and his friends were sitting at a cafe near the park, talking about girls as usual. Then he saw her. She wasn't wearing makeup. She wasn't even trying to be noticed. But she carried something rare: peace. Her eyes looked like they could see through a person's soul. Nelson smiled. "That's my next project," he whispered to his friend. His friend laughed. "This one looks like church girl." "Oh." Nelson shrugged. "Even angels can fall." He stood up, walked over confidently, and said, "Hi, beautiful." You look like someone who deserves better company. She turned, smiled politely, and said, "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" He smiled wider. "Just your number. I want to take you out sometime. I just like you and I would like to be that very one in your life." But her reply stunned him. "I'm sorry. I don't want any relationship. I'm trying to build my relationship with God." Nelson blinked. "What?" She smiled again. "Yes. I have a lot of family altars to break and a lot of spiritual growth to focus on." Nelson forced a laugh. "Wow. You're one of those deep Christians, huh?" She nodded proudly. "Yes. But you can join me in church if you want." She gave him a church flyer and collected his number for follow-up. Nelson walked back to his friends, confused. They laughed. "Playboy, she don't burst your bubble?" He smirked. "We'll see." From that day, joy became his challenge. When she finally sent him a reminder of the church program, he was so happy. The content of the message wasn't his problem at all. His only concern was her number. Sometimes, God uses the people we plan to destroy to deliver us. But Nelson didn't know that yet. Something inside him became restless. He wasn't sure if it was her smile, her calm voice, or the fact that she said no, something no girl had ever dared to do before. He told himself, "She's acting holy. I'll make her fall, and when she does, I'll move on just like I've always done." So he started his mission. Every morning, he sent her a good morning text. "Good morning, my sunshine sun with face. I dreamt about you." She ignored him and his message. He tried again another day. "I miss your beautiful face, can we see again?" She replied this time, but it was about a church program. Nelson groaned. "Oh. This girl now pastor in disguise." One evening, he decided to call her. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was calm, soft, and kind. "Hi, Nelson. How are you doing?" "I'm fine," he said quickly, smiling like she could see him. "Just checking on you. I miss hearing your voice." There was silence for a few seconds, then she said, "Nelson, you don't even know me. You can't say you miss me. I feel you have a vacuum that only the Holy Spirit can fill." He ended the call and sat in silence. For the first time, he felt small. But Nelson was too proud to let go. He convinced himself that she was just forming spiritual. The next few weeks were torture for him. Every attempt to flirt ended in a sermon. If he said, "You're too fine," she replied, "Thank God for his creation." If he said, "I want to see you," she said, "You can see me in church." Nelson's friends laughed at him non-stop. "Brothers, this one not evangelist." Another added, "Leave her before she baptize you by force." But Nelson didn't want to give up. His pride wouldn't let him. He wanted to conquer her heart, not out of love, but out of revenge. He told himself, "Once I get her, I'll move on. She'll learn that she's not even strong in Christ." One Sunday, Joy invited him to her church's youth program. Nelson agreed to come, but deep inside, he was angry that she was turning him into a church boy. The next morning, he woke up early, bathed, dressed neatly, and texted her. "I'm sad but I don't know that church very well. I stay close to where we first met. The very building with a golden gate. You can come, so we can go together. I will be waiting by the gate before you say this son of the devil has another plan." Joy hesitated. Something in her spirit whispered, "Don't go." But she thought, Maybe he's truly changing. And maybe God wants to use me to help him. So she agreed. When she got to his compound, Nelson was already outside, wearing a crisp shirt and a fake innocent smile. "Wow," he said as she approached, "you look angelic." She smiled slightly. "Thanks. Let's go so we won't be late." But just as she was about to enter the car, Nelson's hand moved fast, too fast. A sudden spray hit her face. Her eyes burned. She screamed. Before she could react, he carried her inside. "Nelson, please," she shouted, "what are you doing?" But her words fell on deaf ears. He pinned her down, blinded by lust and revenge. And there, he did the unthinkable. When it was over, Joy lay there trembling, tears streaming down her face. Nelson wasn't happy either. He had thought she was experienced, like the others. He didn't know she was pure. He didn't know she was a virgin. He stepped back, his hands shaking. "Joy. I didn't mean." But she didn't let him finish. She stood up slowly, buttoned her dress, and looked at him with eyes full of tears and disappointment. "Nelson, you didn't just take my pride. You killed something in me. I wanted to keep this as a gift for my husband. But you stole it." Then she walked out, limping, crying, and broken. That night, Nelson couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor, staring at his hands like they were soaked in atrocity. For the first time since Angela broke his heart, he cried again. But this time, it wasn't out of pain, it was guilt. He saw Joy's tears in his mind. He heard her words echoing. "You killed something in me." He wanted to call her, but he couldn't. He wanted to say sorry, but shame silenced him. And for the first time, Nelson realized that he wasn't just playing games with hearts. He was destroying lives. Days passed. Then weeks. No word from Joy and no invitation message. He went to her church once, she wasn't there. He asked about her, but no one knew where she went. And that's when he realized, she was gone. Completely. Nelson tried to return to his old ways, but even the sight of women now disgusted him. He drank more. He avoided his friends. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Joy's face, and her words haunted him. For the first time, Nelson saw the monster he had become. But fate wasn't done with him yet. They say sin looks sweet until it begins to speak. For Nelson, the voice of his sin spoke every night, in the form of Joy's crying face. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a stranger staring back, a man he didn't recognize. He tried to drink away the guilt. He tried to party it off. But no matter what he did, Joy's words echoed in his mind. "You didn't just take my pride. You killed something in me." Nelson had been many things, a flirt, a liar, a heartbreaker, but he was never cruel. That night, he realized how far he had fallen. He thought about calling her again, but what would he say? "Sorry I destroyed your life?" He couldn't. He didn't even deserve forgiveness. So he decided to bury the memory like he buried his emotions, deep inside. He went back to pretending, smiling on the outside but dying on the inside. But what he didn't know was that Joy's silence was not peace. It was pain, growing, bleeding, and multiplying inside her. 2 months later, Joy realized she was pregnant. She sat on her bed that morning, staring at the test strip that confirmed it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "God, why? Why me? I was serving you." I was trying to be holy. Why did you let this happen to me? She cried until her voice broke. She didn't want to go to church. She didn't want to pray. In fact, she started avoiding everyone from church. Not a single person noticed her absence. Not even those who used to call her, our dear sister. She felt invisible and forgotten. She told Nelson and he said to her, "Go and take good care of it like your mates. I am not ready to be your father now." She tried again, but this time he was even more wicked. When she could no longer hide her condition, she packed her few clothes and left for the village. A place she had vowed never to return to. Joy's father, Chief Adigwe, was a well-known native doctor. He was feared in the whole of the south. People said if Chief Adigwe cursed you, even the trees around your house would die. But Joy never liked his ways. She had left home after giving her life to Christ, vowing never to return until God changed her father. Now, shame had forced her back. When Chief Adigwe saw her, he was shocked. "Joy, my daughter, why are you back?" She couldn't hold back her tears. "Papa, I'm sorry. I didn't plan it. It just happened." He frowned, confused. "What happened?" Her lips trembled as she whispered. "Papa, I'm pregnant." "Who did that?" he asked. She hesitated, her eyes heavy with pain. Then she said softly, "His name is Nelson." He narrated what he did and how he had rejected it. Her father's jaw tightened. His eyes turned red. "Where does this Nelson live?" "Papa, please don't." "Where does he live?" he repeated, his voice deep like thunder. Joy sighed in defeat. "In the city." The next morning, before sunrise, the whole village watched as Chief Adigwe tied his red wrapper, carried his cowtail whisk, wore his amulet necklace, and left with his daughter. He didn't speak a word throughout the journey. His silence was louder than thunder. When they arrived the city, Joy's heart pounded like a drum. "Papa, please don't hurt him," she begged. But he said nothing. The next morning, they went to Nelson's compound. He was outside washing his car. When he looked up, what he saw almost made him drop the bucket. Joy was standing there, beside her father dressed in his native doctor attire. Nelson froze. His throat went dry. Before he could even greet, the man thundered, "Are you Nelson?" Nelson nodded slowly. "So you are the one who destroyed my daughter's life?" "Sir, I..." "Shut up," the man thundered. He raised his hand, the cowtail whisk swaying like a serpent. "Listen to me, young man. If I ever hear that you don't take care of my daughter, her pregnancy, or the child after birth, then you will leave me with no option but to make you pick paper on the street before the end of the year." Nelson's knees went weak. He fell to the ground immediately. "Sir, please. I'm sorry. You won't hear any bad reports again, sir." "Good for you," Joy's father said. "From today, if you mistreat her, you will know that the God she serves may be merciful, but her father is not." Then he turned and walked away. From that day, Nelson became a different man. At first, it was fear. But later, it turned into reflection. He started taking care of Joy. He paid for every antenatal appointment. And he made sure she ate well. Joy on her part wasn't demanding. No unnecessary drama or expenses. Whatever Nelson bought for her, she appreciated him, and there was never a day he called putting him under unnecessary pressure because of his wickedness. Nelson watched her, confused. He expected her to insult him, to curse him, or to constantly fight him, but she didn't. She was peaceful, gentle, and kind. One day when he visited, he asked, "Why are you like this? After all I did to you, how can you still be calm?" She smiled faintly. "Because anger won't heal me. Only forgiveness will." Those words pierced his soul. That night, he couldn't sleep. He knelt by his bed for the first time in years and whispered, "God, I don't even know how to pray. But if you can hear me, please, give me a heart like Joy's." He didn't realize it yet, but that simple, broken prayer was the beginning of his healing. Nelson began to change gradually. He stopped drinking. And he stopped flirting. The months passed slowly. Joy's belly grew round and bright like a sunrise. And she still maintained her calm spirit. Nelson watched her with a strange mix of fear and wonder. He had promised Chief Adigwe he would care for Joy and the child. At first it was fear that held him, fear of the chief's anger. But as the days went by, fear melted into responsibility. Then responsibility softened into something else, a small, steady love. One night, Joy called and he panicked because she hadn't, so instantly, he picked up the call. Her voice was soft but strong. "Nelson, the baby is coming." He fumbled for his keys and drove to her house. He held Joy's hand all the way to the hospital. Her breath came in waves. She squeezed his hand and said, "As I go in there, don't stop praying for me, please." Those were words he never thought he would hear. But as she got into the labor room, he knelt on the cold hospital floor, bowed his head, and prayed with hands that had done wrong and a heart that wanted to be new. Hours later, when the cries of a newborn filled the small delivery room, something inside Nelson broke and then mended. The baby's first cry was like a fresh bell. It washed over every hurt in the room. Nelson held the baby for the first time. He had never held anything so pure. The tiny fingers curled around his thumb like a promise. Tears rolled down Nelson's face. He whispered into the infant's ear, "I will protect you." Word spread slowly through the town. People who once saw Nelson as a rogue began to notice his new life. He came to church sometimes, standing at the back, hands in his pockets, listening until the song found him and his eyes filled with tears. Chief Adigwe was told and he was happy. A deep thing moved inside the chief. He remembered his daughter sitting at his knees years ago, asking him to change, that Jesus is the only sure way, the truth and the life. That memory would not leave him. Then something unexpected happened. One morning, a sickness fell on the chief. It was strange and fierce. He could not sleep. And he could not work. He tried herbs and charms, but the medicine could not reach the place the sickness had touched. He grew thin and tired. Even his strongest potions did not work. The whole village murmured, Chief Adigwe, the feared man, had become weak. Joy and Nelson heard the news. Joy cried and said, "We must go." Nelson was frightened, not of the chief now, but of failure. He felt small before the power the chief had once shown. Yet something brave rose inside him. They went to the village. The chief lay on his bed, eyes closed like a man who had given up a long battle. Joy sat near him and took his hand. Nelson stood by the doorway, the little baby in his arms swaddled tight. "Papa," Joy whispered, "we have prayed for you. Will you let us pray with you now?" The chief opened his eyes slowly. Pride and stubbornness lived there, but also a tiredness that had no fight left. He looked at his daughter and then at the young man holding his grandson. Something in him softened. Perhaps it was the sight of the child's small face or the sight of his daughter's patience. Perhaps it was a memory of the girl who had once begged him to stop the dark ways. He did not speak at first. Then he nodded, one small, silent nod that meant, try. Nelson bowed his head and prayed. He prayed with hands that had once been rough and careless, with words that trembled. It was not the loud, long prayer of a man who knew all the rights. It was a simple prayer from someone who had been broken and now wanted healing. Joy prayed too, gentle and steady. She prayed for forgiveness, for healing, and for her father's heart to be opened. The little baby slept in Nelson's arms, unaware of the weight of what was happening. After the prayer, a quiet fell. The chief sat up slowly. I feel different, he said in a voice like dry leaves. Tears fell down his cheeks. What did you do? He asked. Joy smiled and said, we prayed, Papa. God hears prayers. The chief looked at the little boy and then at Nelson. He reached out and touched the baby's small hand. Then he did something no one expected. He rose and asked to be taken to the church. People stared. The proud native doctor walking to a church felt like a story turned inside out. Yet that day, he entered the church and sat quietly. He listened. Tears fell from his eyes as the pastor spoke of mercy and new life. He remembered his daughter's prayers from long ago, and the memory burned like a light. After some weeks, he publicly burned some of his charms. He stood before the people and said he had found the surest way. It was not a sudden miracle that erased every wrong thing he had done. But it was a start and a real change. The village celebrated the healing. They rejoiced that a heart once steeped in darkness began to soften. For Nelson, the chief's partial conversion felt like a seal on a long road. He had cried, repented, and been given a small chance to be a father, but he needed to become a husband. So he married Joy properly because they both fell in love with each other. He asked for forgiveness formally even though it was obvious she had forgiven him. And they lived in peace. One afternoon, Nelson was in his office when someone knocked on his door. Come in, he said without looking up. When he raised his eyes, his heart skipped. It was Angela, the woman who once broke his heart into pieces without pity. She hadn't changed much, still beautiful, still confident, but her eyes had a sadness that was hard to hide. Nelson, she said softly. He froze. Angela. What are you doing here? I came for a business contract. I didn't know you work here. She smiled faintly, the same smile that once melted him. For a few minutes, they spoke about work. Then, silence. Finally, Angela said, Nelson, you've changed. He nodded slowly. Yes. God changed me. She smiled again, sadly this time. I heard you got married. I'm happy for you. But her eyes said something else. Then she added, do you ever think about us? About what we had? Nelson's heart tightened. The old memories flickered, the love, the pain, and the night he swore never to love again. He took a deep breath. Sometimes I think about what I became because of you. But I don't regret it anymore. It brought me to where I am now. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I wish I had chosen you. My husband left me. I lost everything. And sometimes I wonder what could have been. For a second, silence filled the office. The air grew heavy. Nelson looked at her, the woman who once defined his pain. Then he said softly, Angela, maybe you should start from what I did, by forgiving yourself and letting God fix what's left. He stood up, walked to the window, and said, I won't lie. You hurt me deeply. But hating you almost destroyed me. But I have forgiven you. Angela wiped her tears. You really are different. She turned to leave, and just before she reached the door, she said quietly, "Nelson, if your joy ever leaves you, please remember that I am here waiting for you." Those words stayed with him long after she left. That evening, Joy noticed something. Nelson was quieter than usual. He barely spoke through dinner. "Nelson," she asked softly, "is something wrong?" He hesitated. He didn't want to lie. "Joy. Angela came to my office today." Joy froze. "The same Angela?" He nodded. "Yes. But don't worry, it was work. She's in a bad place now. I just advised her to turn to God." Joy smiled faintly. "I'm glad you told me." She paused. "Nelson, I'm not afraid of your past. I just don't want it to hold you anymore." He looked at her, so calm, so understanding. "Joy, I know I don't deserve you, but please don't leave me," she said. "If you leave, that I should always remember that she is waiting for me." She touched his hand and smiled. "Don't worry about that. I'm here for the covenant of marriage and not contract." Nelson thanked her, and was so expressive about it. He was so happy that God in his mercy used his foolishness to bless him. Years passed, and the story of Nelson and Joy became more than just a marriage, it became a message. Every Friday evening, they opened their doors to young men and women who had been through heartbreak, abuse, betrayal, or addiction. Nelson spoke to the men, and Joy spoke to the women. When Nelson told his story, he would say, "Once upon a time, I thought revenge was strength. I thought breaking hearts would heal mine. But I was wrong. Each heart I broke made me more empty until I met a girl who wouldn't fall for my lies." And then he would smile gently and point to Joy, sitting in the crowd. "She was the one God used to break me so he could build me again." The young men always listened with eyes wide. Some cried. Some bowed their heads. Many saw a reflection of their own darkness in his story, and hoped that they too could change. Joy became known for her quiet power. She didn't preach loudly or speak in big grammar. She simply told her story, how she once felt God had abandoned her after Nelson's betrayal, how she struggled with shame, and how forgiveness gave her wings again. She often said, "Forgiveness doesn't excuse the wrong. It just frees you from carrying it." Women came from different towns just to hear her speak. Many cried openly, saying her story gave them courage to live again. Sometimes, Joy would hold little Hope in her arms while preaching and say, "God can turn your greatest pain into your greatest testimony. Look at me, I was supposed to be broken forever, but see what God made from my tears." As for Chief Edigwe, his transformation became a miracle in itself. He no longer wore charms or beads. The same hands that once drew symbols on the ground now held a Bible. He became known in the village as Bobe Testimony. People who once came to him for charms now came for prayers. He would tell them, "If God can forgive a stubborn man like me, then he can forgive anyone." One year, on the anniversary of their marriage, Nelson and Joy decided to hold a Thanksgiving of Grace. They invited everyone who had ever been part of their journey, friends, family, church members, even some of Nelson's old friends who still didn't believe he had changed. The hall was packed. As they stood at the front, Joy smiled at Nelson and said softly, "Look how far we've come." He nodded, eyes glistening. "If not for you, I would still be lost." She smiled. "If not for God, I would never have forgiven you." Then Nelson stepped forward to speak. His voice trembled slightly, but it was steady enough to carry truth. "Once, I was a man filled with bitterness. I thought women were my enemies. I used them, hurt them, and laughed about it. But that laughter was empty. Until the day I met Joy, the girl who refused to fall. I tried to break her, but in breaking her, I found myself broken too. And that was the beginning of my healing. God used the very mess I created to give me a message. And today, I'm here to say, no one is too far gone for grace. There was silence, then applause. Even the men who used to mock him wiped their eyes. Then Joy stepped up and spoke softly. Forgiveness doesn't make what happened right. It makes your heart free enough to love again. I forgave Nelson not because he deserved it, but because I needed peace. And when I forgave him, God gave me everything I lost: peace, love, and joy. The crowd stood and clapped, shouting hallelujah. Years later, when people spoke of Nelson and Joy, they didn't talk about the scandal, the heartbreak, or the sin. They talked about redemption, how a broken man and a wounded woman found healing together. Nelson became a marriage counselor and author. His first book was titled, Broken Men Don't Stay Broken. Joy founded a women's outreach called Daughters of Grace, helping girls who had suffered abuse and betrayal find purpose again. And with that their story ended. This story is not told to justify what Nelson did. Not at all. What he did was wrong, painfully wrong. He broke a woman's trust, shattered her innocence, and caused wounds that only God could heal. But this story is told to remind us of one simple truth: no matter what you have done, no matter how dark your past is, Jesus can still forgive you. Maybe you've done things you're ashamed of. Maybe you think you've gone too far or that God has no reason to look your way again. But listen to me, Jesus does not run away from storms. He steps into the boat and calms them. Nelson's life was a wreck, his heart full of bitterness and regret, but the moment he allowed Jesus into his mess, peace returned. The same God who forgave Nelson can forgive you. The same grace that lifted him can also lift you. So don't let guilt keep you in bondage. Don't let shame silence you. Jesus is still waiting, not with condemnation, but with compassion. Because it's not about how bad you've been. It's about how good His mercy still is. So please like, share, and comment if you enjoyed this story. Thank you and bye.